Welcome to Reality, the show for teens, by teens, about teens. I'm JK, and I'm not kidding, and I'm your host. If you haven't guessed it already, today we'll be talking about the military. Today I'm joined by Christian Tynan, a young man who is enlisting in the Connecticut Air National Guard. Christian, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So Christian, I'm curious, you're about 18 years old. How did you first get interested in the military?
I have always been into the military. I've always wanted to join since about the 5th grade. I remember, looking at my uncle who joined the Marine Corps and, really looking up to him, really thinking that that guy can do everything. Now, it had nothing to do with the military, but that was something that he did that I was, interested in. And so in the 5th grade, I actually set the goal to join the Air Force through the Air Force Academy. And, in 5th grade, here I was, this little 5th grader, making my plans for college, which was interesting to look at, So I, set the plan to, join the Air Force, Air Force Academy, and I was told by, the advisors at school, oh, you're a little young to be thinking about college. Why don't you, join some extracurriculars? Like the Boy Scouts, So that's what I did. I joined the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts, really emphasize, safety and outdoorsmanship and, all sorts of things, family. And actually, I wasn't a Boy Scout for very long, so I can't tell you, anything about the Boy Scouts. But what I ended up doing after that was joining the Young Marines. I did the Young Marines. I was in sports, and I learned, how to be on a team, followership, and leadership, and every coach talks about that. I remember, being on sports teams, and I took extracurricular classes. I took MMA, in middle school, and I thought that was cool. And all of these, instructors and coaches would always emphasize certain characteristics, and they say, oh yeah, we know you're interested in the military. This is important, so you should stick with it. But I actually ended up finding extracurriculars that were much more, I guess, in line with what I felt like I wanted to do, like the Young Marines and the Civil Air Patrol. So I joined the Young Marines in Waterbury, Connecticut. That's where they were founded, and so I always thought that was like a neat thing. And I joined the Young Marines, and I did everything they said, and they loved me, and I thought it was fun. And I realized that I was actually joining a babysitting program. I actually hated it. I hated the Young Marines. It was pointless. It was do push-ups because you're a bad kid, and I said so. And that was my personal experience. When I left that, all upset and I was discouraged about it. My mother pulled me aside and told me that an organization is only as good as the people who run it. So from there forward, I realized, with that in mind, I can take it in easier and learn things in a different way, which helped me. So I actually ended up joining the Civil Air Patrol in the 9th grade. The Civil Air Patrol, as you know, or might not know, but is the official auxiliary of the United States Air Force. And it has a cadet program that is awesome. I loved it. I, jumped right in, and I said, I signed. I showed up, and I said, this is something I want to do. And they said, haha, that's funny. You have to come to 3 meetings, so we know you want to do this. And I said, okay, yeah, but can I have an application? I filled it out right there. I knew immediately this is what I wanted to do. So they took it and they said, all right, we'll wait 3 meetings. So I came 3 weeks in a row, and each week was a different routine and setup, and I still loved it. I loved it. They wear a military uniform, right? They have standards. They have aerospace education and leadership education. It was basically you're in, as some people would say, an Air Force cadet, right? Now, of course, Air Force cadets at, like military colleges are not the same as what I was doing. It wasn't that rigorous. I didn't have to go away for any extreme training, but it was a program for high school students, to go up through the ranks that they had set, which followed the Air Force ranks, and you had to learn to move forward. You did learn. If you stuck with it, you learned a lot. And being in that organization, I actually ended up liking the Air Force more. So I took that and ran with it. I went through every rank in that program and made it all the way up to captain. Before I outgrew it and started doing the next thing in my life. But I've done other things since then. I was a Sea Scout, and I wore a Navy uniform. I was a young Marine, like I said, and I wore that. The dress uniforms. The Air Force, the Civil Air Patrol, they wore a variation of the Air Force blues. I remember getting my uniform in the mail, and it said from Lackland Air Force Base. Super cool. For me, I thought that was super cool. I was like, wow, this is so real, and it was neat, it was neat, and it made me feel a part of something big. So I liked that. That's one thing that I like about the idea of joining the military is you're not just you can join and be something that's much bigger than you, and be a part of something much larger, which is why a lot of people join. That's why a lot of people join a lot of things. That's why a lot of people join sports teams and charities and go to school and all these things like that. So after that, I actually went through a phase where I wanted to be in every branch of the military. I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. On my rough days, I'm like, I'll just do something crazy, and just ready myself for some traveling overseas. And I wanted to be in the Navy, and I was like, wow, I could go do something there. It's all fun. It's all interesting. For the longest time, I was actually convinced by friends to do Army ROTC. So, my senior year in high school, I prepared myself for Army ROTC. I actually ended up getting the scholarship, but not for the school that I wanted, and not for the school that I, got into. So it wasn't worth anything to me. So actually then I decided, I'll just, nothing. I'm not going to do anything. I'll go home and do something else, So I actually ended up going to school, and I'm, an engineering student. And I joined a volunteer fire department in lieu of joining the military. So I've been super active with that. I love that. That's awesome. It's so much fun. It's a lot of action. I learn everything. I learn a lot. I get my hands on a lot of things, and I have a lot of experience with that. Just being, just have been in the department for just a couple months now. So recently I was sitting down thinking, hey, I've wanted to join the Air Force since I was, in 5th grade. Here I am, I'm a freshman in college, and I've been thinking about this for so long. Why didn't I do it? Why didn't I end up there? Why do I find myself thinking about it and, basically regretting, regretting the fact that I didn't join? So I thought, well, school's important. I started that project. I'm not going to give that up, right? So, how can I keep that? How can I have my cake and eat it too, so to speak, And, well, that's what I did. I joined, the Air National Guard. So the great thing about the Air National Guard is, it's sort of like being a reservist. However, I'm a employee of my state. So I don't have to leave my state necessarily, to be working for them. So I can stay at home, with my friends and family. I can stay in school, actively, right? I can stay at the fire department. I can still work. I can still learn. And at the same time, what I have to do right now is to just go to basic training, and my technicals training, and spend that time and prepare myself to work 1 week in a month. It's not that big of a commitment. So I'm super excited.
That's great. I honestly didn't know that the military was such a big part of your life, and they will be lucky to have you there. What are some of the morals or ideals of the military that attract you?
That's a good question. I have found myself following a set of core values since I joined the Civil Air Patrol. Things like excellence, selflessness, those two, for example, start in you, and they start inside you and grow outside. Now, you might think, what does that mean? Well, you sit and think about that. What does that mean first, right? Yourself, right? And as you're thinking about it, you start to see yourself doing things that follow suit. So, for example, I sit and I'm asking myself, how do I follow, excellence, right? And, well, as you're thinking about it, I noticed that I started setting myself, higher goals and higher standards, and excellence, showed itself, like sunlight, and volunteer service is always, it's always fulfilling. And I like to think personally that it's fulfilling for everybody. I don't know anyone that hasn't done something and think, wow, that's great, I helped someone today. I saw a TED Talk once. I forgot who was speaking, however, it was a fireman. And all he was talking about was how he went to a call, he was at a fire, he walked in and everyone was at work, and he went up to the chief and said, hey, where do you want me? What do you need me to do? He said, you're going to go in and you're going to get this woman some shoes. So I guess the woman of the house, that she was living in the house and she was outside, escaped, no one was hurt. She was left outside barefoot. And she was complaining about everything. Of course, her house is falling down, but more importantly, my dog, my shirts, my jewelry, my shoes, and like, geez, when you like, that's not something you expect, from a person that's going through that. So the chief said, you go get the dog. Now you're gonna go get the shoes. And he was kind of, taken back, like, why can't I be the superhero? I'm just going to get some. I'm just going to walk up there and get some shoes, Well, he brought the shoes down. He gave them to the woman, and she said, thank you so much. And about 2 months later, he got a letter in the mail and said, the fire department did everything that I expected it to. It put out the fire in my home. It saved my dog. It got me out of the building. But they were so nice enough to put some shoes on my feet. And the guy said in his TED Talk, after reading that, he felt, wow, that did matter. It did make a change, right? And being in the fire department, I see a lot of change in every day in everyday lives, people waving, people actually, I think it's funny, people will drop by and leave little snacks, or there's this lady that comes very often and she'll leave tickets at the door for shows, at the casino in Connecticut, and she'll leave tickets, 2 or 3 tickets, every here and there, and we enjoy it, but it's a thank you, it's a thank you. Now, how does this tie in with the military? Well, these are core values that the military sets itself up for. They absolutely embody selflessness. Excellence in all we do. Service before self is a core value in the Air Force. Integrity, excellence in all we do, and service before self are the 3 core values of the United States Air Force. Integrity is important because a lot of other great characteristics stem from integrity, and integrity is simply just doing what is right even when no one is looking. Honesty. For example, that stems from integrity. Now that's great, and we know that. I can say, "Oh, integrity is good," and everyone goes, "Yeah, integrity is good," right? But and I can say excellence is good, and everyone goes, "Yeah, I guess so." And service before self, I can say that's good. Everyone goes, "Yeah, well, I would rather spend my day watching TV." So not everyone would agree with that, right? But I think, personally, I believe that even though not everyone would agree with service before self, they would certainly feel good about themselves after they do something, without being asked, helping someone in need, and that's awesome. And the military absolutely embodies that, For example, the National Guard in particular, in each state will help out during a, natural disaster. Last summer we had the hurricane, right? And that was crazy, right? Trees through homes, flooding, people trapped through, debris and rubble, crazy things. And who came in? The National Guard. I know a couple people that have stories here and there about their encounter with the National Guard and how the National Guard helped them, in their state. That's who it belongs to. The National Guard, the National Guard and the Air National Guard are two separate things. But when I say that, they're both helping. I'm referring to both of them as helpful to the state, right? So the state, but more importantly, the community, right? Of the people that, that matter, that live there. Not just, I work for the state. No, they work for the community. And people in the military say, I work for the government, I'm in the Air Force. But people who work for the National Guard and the Air National Guard might sit there and say, no, I work for my community. Of course there's someone that says, I just work for the state. But, not everybody. I find that more people, personally, I find that more people, in the, the National Guard, Army National Guard and the Air National Guard levels, sit and say, I work for my community.
That's really nice. And I'm really glad that of all military people, someone who hasn't even enlisted yet already knows all of these integrities and morals that you're going to be upholding and how you've been able to uphold these ever since, 5th grade. That's actually really awesome. Many of these organizations you've named, like the Civil Air Patrol and the Young Marines, are ways that young kids and other teenagers could get active in the military. How did you find yourself into these organizations? Like, how did you find them on your own?
It's a great question. I think that the Civil Air Patrol actually did it for me. That was my favorite. That was the one I stayed with the longest. That's the one I took it and I ran with it. I had the most experience. I learned the most. They are preparing cadets, from the ages of 12 to 21, more so the older cadets, but they're preparing these cadets to possibly, enlist into the military or go to, the academies or become an officer. They're preparing them for that. I learned how to wear my Air Force blues before I joined the Air Force. I learned, the Air Force core values, for example, and what they mean and what they represent before I joined the Air Force. I absolutely, I've learned a lot. Absolutely. I've gone, all over the United States with the Civil Air Patrol, and I was 12, maybe 13, when I was at the New England Air Museum with my mother and my sister, and I saw a recruiting booth of cadets, and they were sloppy. They were just kind of hanging out. Well, they're just kids, of course, right? They're just kids. And I remember walking past them thinking, that's cool, meh, But actually, it was a year later that I said, I'm going to actually check it out. So I looked up online, where can I find the closest Civil Air Patrol? And I, found it, and I didn't even call or anything. I just showed up. I just showed up expecting they would be there. And it was like in the sketchiest armory I've ever seen, in the sketchiest street in the middle of the night, and my mom just drops me off. See ya, And so I go in there, and I see them marching around, drilling around, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. How can they get a bunch of 12-year-olds to do that? It's beyond me, that's so cool. And, well, I joined that. And so through this, I've met, retired military personnel. I've met reservists and guardsmen that come back and are, still serve in the Civil Air Patrol. However, through traveling and through just the experience itself, being in the Civil Air Patrol, it naturally attracts active duty military personnel and the Air Force, more than anyone else, right? Because it's the Air Force Auxiliary. So I met a lot of, active duty Air Force, and also when I went off to, these training exercises, I went to Colorado to study Space Command. That was the coolest. And I met some of the coolest Air Force officers ever. I met the commander of NORAD, the deputy commander of NORAD Northcom. So that's awesome. right off the bat. That's great. That's so super cool. Now, but it was these people who started talking to me and started informing me about my choices and options and paths to join the military. However, you also have the recruiter, right? Say, for example, if there's a high school student who hasn't had this experience, right? I was very fortunate. But say, for example, there's a high school student who hasn't had this experience, where's he going to go? What's he going to do? Well, there's the recruiter for that, right? Now, recruiters don't go out and nab every kid they can because that's not good business, Joining the military has a couple different vibes it gives off. One, oh yeah, duty, honor. But then there's the other one, oh, war, defense, military. That's crazy to some people, And so you can't exactly just go up to kids and just say, oh yeah, you come here. You're going to join the military. Well, recruiters they keep to themselves for the most part. If you are interested, you should absolutely find out where your local recruiter is for which branch. And typically, there'll be in offices that are together. It won't be Air Force recruiter, it'll be Armed Services, or Armed Forces Recruiting Center. That's what they'll be called. And you'll have 2 or 3 branches, maybe all of the branches, sitting in the office, ready for people to walk in and say, I'm ready to, join. And you have to come up with questions. Right? So when you're talking with the recruiter, you want to make sure that you've done your research because they can absolutely trick you. Now everyone says, oh, don't talk to recruiters, they're shady. Well, yes and no. They're not going to lie and hold up an apple and say, this is an orange. They're going to equivocate. They're going to hold back things that, they might not want to tell you, in hopes to not disenchant you, They want to totally make this look like, a gold paved road, So when you go into the recruiting office and they say, hey kid, you want to join Special Forces, it's super cool. What they're not telling you is, oh yeah, it's a lot of hard work, things like that, right? So you want to make sure that you have an idea of what you want to do, right? You want to ask lots of questions. Right? They are a great resource, but don't let them, join you into the military. You join into the military through them, right? They're a tool. So yeah, absolutely. Go online, find out where the local recruiter is. Get in contact, ask lots of questions, start the process that way.
Totally. Now, why do you think, as a teenager yourself who's been involved in the military for years now, why do you think it's important for the youth and other teenagers like yourself to get involved?
Okay. Well, you can be involved in many different ways, right? Before I joined the military, I joined a fire department, and that's still helping. I think it's important that not just teenagers or youth, but for everyone, to find something that they enjoy doing that's selfless, The fire department's super awesome. It's super fun, and I love doing it. And all the experiences I get, the learning, and the job opportunity that comes with it. Now that's something that I think about personally. But as far as the youth and teenagers, high school students, early college students, thinking about why should I join the military? Well, you're like right off the bat, you're joining something that's much bigger than yourself. So they have their own reasons why the military is important. You can find value in that, or you can find your own value in that. So like I want to join the military for a number of reasons, right? I can sit and tell you that I love the sense of selflessness, which I do. I absolutely do. But I can also sit and tell you that I love the education benefits that come with it. Oh man, I can tell you that I do get a little bit of a paycheck every weekend that I go. I can tell you that there's somewhat of a job security, right? Because of a 6-year contract. Yeah. Right now, if you go active duty, you can sign for 4, 6, or 8 years, I believe. Now, I'm not a recruiter, so don't quote me, but you can sign for however long you'd like, right? Or however long you're able to sign for. And there are other benefits, right? So everyone has their own reason for joining the military. But personally, if you're going to ask me why I think someone should join the military, is because the how much you learn and you can take away from that. It's basically like spoon-fed experience, really, because once they find out that you're able to join, they'll take you, and once they take you, they will train you. Just do what you're told. Do what you're told. You can come out, with those benefits like the education and the paycheck and the insurance, things like that. But you can come out and later on and say, oh yeah, I'll be what I was in the military, in the civilian world. And oftentimes in the military, you can get top secret clearances, depending on what job you pick and how you score in the ASVAB and where you qualify, right, where you land. But say for example, if you're a smart kid, you love the idea of honor and duty and selflessness, then you can absolutely join the military, gain that experience, have that training, right? The work experience and step away with the clearance. The clearances cost I'm going to take this out of a hat. I'm going to say $10,000. I know they're very expensive, and other companies in the workforce, like Pratt and Whitney, an airplane company in Connecticut, a great, huge Northrop Grumman, and an aerodynamic, company in New York, in Long Island. These companies will absolutely take people off the street as long as they have the experience and the education and the clearance. Clearance is, it's a big part, So there are many reasons why someone should join the military, and you can take what reasons the military will offer you, but everyone joins for their own reasons.
That's great. Now we've got about a minute left. How about you talk about what your future aspirations are after the Connecticut Air National Guard?
Okay. I want to go to, I want to finish schooling as an engineer. I want to go to law school, and I want to get into politics. I love politics, but I figure I can, do some crazy, awesome, fun things in the military and in the fire department and in school and in the workforce and, just have a great life. And one day when I have great grandkids and they look at me and they say, oh, you're so old, how was your life? And I say, it was great. That's what I care about.
We've got a future president over here. Well, I can't wait to vote for you.
Thanks.
Today we've talked to Christian about the military, why it's important to get involved, different ideals that it portrays, and how it's for everyone. Christian, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
This has been Reali. Thanks for watching.